Hello, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations on the open for the public and on the level. That's it. To interact with us, send questions and comments to our Facebook stream, our YouTube stream, and our X stream. That sounds fun. And who knows, your comments may end up on the show. So check yourself. As always, if you can't catch us live, catch us on the replay or in your favorite podcasting app. You know me, my name is John Ruark, and I am the past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957. Over to Joe. How's it going, Joe?
Okay. Are you okay?
I'm doing great.
I saw like 3 mini strokes occur.
Just a few.
Production. Yes. Hello, Joe Martinez, past master. Manassas Lodge, number 182, member of Things and Stuff. And as always, damn glad to be here. And yeah, I hope you're okay, John. I'm going to keep eyes on you.
Organized your skulls. That's important.
Yes, we have unpacked the office again. We're back to nerd and esotericism. Just all of it. Just hitting me.
Nice.
Yes. Good to see y'all.
Good to see you. And last but not least, Jason Richards. How you doing?
Hello, I'm good.
Hello.
Jason Richards, past master of Vacation Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, a member of a couple other lodges in other parts. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Well, cool. Let's see. Definitely want to give a shout out to the patrons who support the show. You guys are awesome. Head over to patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable for muchos besos.
Muchos besitos. Yes.
Little kisses.
Besetitos.
And SodaStream, not a sponsor.
Not a sponsor. Awesome. And then for tonight, we have a special segment we've never done before.
Tarot card of the week.
Try it. It'll be new. People might like it.
Never heard that.
It's Joe's favorite segment of all time.
Always.
Actually,
it's his new favorite thing ever.
Yes.
So tonight, for Tarot Card of the Week, we are going super old school. We are going back to 1450s in Milan, Italy, for the Visconti Sforza tarot. This is one of 3 oldest kind of proto tarot decks, and one of 3 of the oldest ones that we know of. And so this was tarot when it was back still a game, and didn't necessarily have the occult
story.
Yeah, it hadn't been treated by the likes of Papoose or A.E. Waite and other occultists. So this is a game, but most of the cards are still those cards that we know about. So we'll go ahead and pick a card, any card. Deck is already shuffled, so let's see. Let's go with this one. All right.
Who dat?
I don't rightly know. And that's
a great tarot card pull.
The lady in the chair.
The lady in the chair. Yes. There we go. This will be a better one.
Because you can count the things.
5 of Pentacles, or the 5 circles.
Pentacles. Yes.
We've got the 5 circles.
Well, I don't like that card.
I am still learning the card.
Well, why don't you know what the lady in the chair means first, and then come back to us?
Okay.
Because you made me sad with the 5 of coins. That's a sad card.
It's a sad card. Oh.
Yeah, that's usually when they're out in the walking out in the snow.
Oh
and
yes.
the Rider-Waite system, where they're
You've lost things.
cold, destitute, right?
Destitute. That's a good word.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
SAT word of the day.
So I believe that the lady in the chair is the Empress.
Empress. Yeah, that would make sense.
Yes. So, or we could do John's favorite card.
No.
Ooh.
Burn it with
Boo-hoo-hoo.
fire. Pretty card though.
I'm trying to find the
Not a Tower fan.
woman. Oh, actually, no. This is the Queen of Pentacles. She's got a coin.
Oh, okay.
that she's
Oh,
holding.
well, yeah.
Queen of
the circle.
Coins. There we go.
All right.
And I'll snap a picture of this card and
No, I like that.
share it here in a sec. See, we got there in the end.
So we went from destitution to
lady-
motherly security.
Well, technically motherly security to destitution and then back.
That's how life is.
Like that
Speaking
space-
of,
It's like that space between having children, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I have plenty. Oh no, I have a child. Now I'm broke again. Oh, I'm plenty again.
It's a double income, no kids thing, man.
yeah, that's great.
Yes.
So speaking of who's your mother and who's your grandmother, let's talk about Grand Lodges,
Let's.
because this is an interesting topic that Jason threw out here as an idea. Took invoking the evocative description of Grand Lodge obsolescence. So while we do not wish any Grand Lodges to become obsolete, there will be a time, probably before 2040, where we might have to consider what the closing down and functions that remain of the Grand Lodge systems that we know and love today, how that might operate, what is necessary for a Grand Lodge. Yeah, it's a conversation that, frankly, some jurisdictions need to have, because unfortunately, membership numbers are going down, and for some jurisdictions, it's frighteningly small. For example, looking at last year's Masonic Services Association numbers, Alaska only has about 1,300 Master Masons in the state. Big state, lot, pretty spread out. But even in the continental U.S., Utah only has 1,469.
Wow.
So again, another big state, very few Masons in that state. There's a lot of these states that really need to consider, is the juice worth the squeeze in maintaining the structure, both the physical buildings as well as the administrative structure of Grand Lodges?
Well, and that's it's geographically different, right? You've got these jurisdictions with low numbers that really may have tiny little overhead. They don't have a building. They don't have, they're not like Texas or, these jurisdictions that have these grandiose, huge buildings, that they're paying lots of money to and things like that. So the lady in the chair is back.
Pretty.
That's cool. Okay. Why are we looking at her?
Because I said I'd snap a picture and bring her back up so that people could see it better.
Thank you.
Okay, back to Grand Lodges and what they do or don't do.
I don't know. They do stuff, and I don't know. I'm completely.
Stuff and things.
Yes, took me off
Well,
my.
I think it's a natural point to ask the question,
Right.
is there a time
Mhm.
when a Grand Lodge or Grand Lodge system would become obsolete, and what would be the hallmarks of or the signs of that obsolescence?
Well, I think too, and we were talking about this in the green room. I think before we get to that, we should probably try and figure out what exactly is the purpose of a Grand Lodge, what it's supposed to do. We know what it does or doesn't do, but what's it supposed to do? What's its purpose in life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you look historically, we've talked a lot about, even recently, how the Grand Lodge systems were started to be instituted, like the spread of colonial masonry and how we needed to form our own independent Grand Lodges, so that way we could just get our work and our organization a little bit more structured. But even then, historically, the rush was really not to get a Grand Lodge. The rush was really just to get a Grand Master, historically. And then, as you guys mentioned, there was another function early on out of Anderson's constitutions that was really the primary purpose of getting together, which was
Beasts.
feasts.
The feast.
Feasting.
Because Masons like to eat, so we need to do that as well.
And drink. But some of
Yes.
us stopped doing that. Yes, the feasts had, as John is pointing out, alcohol.
I don't believe it.
Yep.
Not in my year. So then after that, you have to wonder, okay, they get organized, they elect Grand Master to do the administration, but then, like, what was established then and how things have evolved, 250, 300 years later, at least here in the States, there's a lot more bureaucracy that gets added on, right? For those unfamiliar, you have a Grand Lodge system that is kind of the administrative body per jurisdiction, per state, usually. And they each control their own laws, their own Masonic law. And there's usually some sort of amendment process to add or subtract from the Masonic law that is sovereign to that state. So over time, over hundreds of years, you're going to get duties that are going to be mostly the same, but may be different depending on the jurisdiction that you're in. And as with all good administrations, the longer they exist, the more bloated they get, the more bureaucratic they get, the less value they produce for their subordinate organizations that they serve.
Somebody's a libertarian.
No, I'm just saying, even Rome fell, so,
Well, I mean, honestly, when I hear you say that, I go back to the part. What was the actual purpose besides electing a Grand
Right.
Master? What was the purpose of forming a Grand Lodge? We talked about honoring the feasts. Some sort of organizational entity. That's lovely. Some sort of administrative entity so that people can get cards and lapel pins, and that's awesome.
Right.
Also, but what was its actual purpose? What did those 4 lodges in London decide that why do we need to? We're already 4 lodges, right? And those 4 lodges have been in existence already, and we're doing things and we're doing the masonry. But why did they decide to come together and form a grand body, a body over them? That wasn't rhetorical. I'm looking for an answer.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you.
Well, I mean, that grand body only lasted 30 years before they had a schism. It might not have been that grand after all.
Because again, they weren't worried about recognition. They weren't worried about ritual. Like, what was the impetus to say that things are not going well the way it is currently, and we need to have an organizational structure to keep us organized?
Well, and honestly, if you look at the Grand Lodge of Scotland, formed in 1736, the reason for that was to recover the glory of, essentially ancient masonry. There was the guild masonry of Scotland, which was not flashy at all. But then there were these speculatives over in England that had regalia and parades and all of that stuff. And so the Lodge of Edinburgh, with a couple other lodges said, hey, we want more of that and less of the guild system. So let's create a Grand Lodge so that we can have more of that speculative masonry.
Right. All right. Well, let's fast forward to
power consolidation. A lot of it.
I mean, essentially. Yep. Essentially, so now what I'm wondering is, okay, let's fast forward to today. where would we find the duties, at least currently codified, for each Grand Lodge? And so that
In
would
your
be
code.
it would be in your Masonic law, in your code as written by the Grand Lodge, right? It's good to write the rules.
Yeah.
So I have Virginia's up, and I was just skimming through that previous to the show. I know Joe has a couple other jurisdictions, but in Virginia, we have our code is called the Methodical Digest. In Chapter 3, Section 1, they talk about who consists of the Grand Lodge, meaning the members themselves, the Grand Master, Grand Senior Deacon, etc. How, the organizational bodies, all the subordinate lodges under there consist of that they have to meet once a year. So some of the just administrative part. And then Section 2 goes on to say, like, what happens if no one can show up. Section 3 is the good one, of the particular business. So what does the Grand Lodge of Virginia do? So I'll just actually read this excerpt here to kind of go into why this Grand Lodge needs to exist. The business of the Grand Lodge is seriously to discourse of and sedately to consider, transact, and settle all matters that concern the prosperity of the craft, the fraternity in general, or private lodges, and single brothers in particular. So basically everything. Here, therefore, are all differences to be seriously considered and decided that cannot be made up and accommodated privately, nor by particular lodges. And if any brother thinks himself aggrieved by the decision of any private lodge, he may, by lodging an appeal in writing with the Grand Secretary, have the matter reheard and finally determined upon, and the Grand Lodge may adjourn from day to day until the business is finished. And the Grand Master or presiding officer, when the lodge is regularly opened, shall communicate to the lodge the nature of whatever business is to come before them, and for the sake of admitting witnesses, etc., etc. Yeah, so basically, it's to settle everything that the individual private lodges can't handle themselves, and to be an appellate body, right? When something can't be determined, you have some higher structure like the Supreme Court, right, that you can go to settle peaks and quarrels.
Peaks and quarrels. We never have peaks and quarrels on Freemason.
We should make sure that we add that in.
Yes. No private peaks and quarrels. It doesn't say no peaks and quarrels. It says private peaks and quarrels.
Private. You can have the public.
You can have peaks and quarrels. They just got to be up in your face. So I've got a couple.
You have to spill the tea, as it were.
Oh, shout out!
So
yeah.
Well, so before you get to the first question that comes to mind when I read that, okay, you need a governing structure to settle those things. A little broad: prosperity of the craft, fraternity in general, or private lodges and single brothers. That's in today's society, like we have arbitrators, like we have organizations that are third-party people to settle things outside of the court system, right? So technically, like without it being codified in the law, if this law didn't exist, if two lodges had a beef with each other, they could hire a third party to settle it kind of out of court.
Arbitration, baby.
Yeah, exactly. So the function could be done elsewhere anyway.
Is that RJ?
Good evening, RJ.
With facial hair?
With some. It's growing. It's growing.
coming.
I'm sorry I'm late. I got some devastating news. The fraternal world will be rocked. Yeah, we had a death, but I don't think I'm allowed to say it yet. So
Sorry to hear.
Fair.
you all will be sorry. So it's a bummer. But anyway, so what's where are we at? What are we talking about?
We are
Did the
figuring
Grand
out
Lodge go obsolete already?
why they exist.
We haven't gotten that part yet. To that part yet.
So, yeah.
Talking
We're
about
trying to
why
figure
they
out-
exist.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out, do they know why they exist? And why do they exist? Yes.
Because if we arrive at consensus on why a Grand Lodge exists, then we have a rubric for determining whether they are adding value.
It's very logical. I like it, Jason.
Yes.
Joe, you were going to dive into another section?
South Carolina. So in their constitutions, we have Article 11. And it says the Grand Lodge will, in its judicial capacity, investigate and adjudicate all matters of controversy which may arise between any of the subordinate lodges under its jurisdiction or the members of different lodges, and in the enforcement of discipline upon its own officers and members and upon the lodges under its jurisdiction, as well as in all matters of controversy and discipline proper for Masonic investigation, which may be brought before it by the appeal of the aggrieved party. So that's it for that one.
Not dissimilar.
Kind of similar, yeah. And then I also have the District of Columbia here, which scarily sounds very similar. So it says here, the Grand Lodge shall hear and determine all appeals from constituent lodges and questions of dispute between two or more lodges. Hear and decide all charges and complaints against officers of the Grand Lodge or the master of a lodge, which may be brought before the Grand Lodge by a lodge or an individual Mason. Hear and decide all charges and complaints against constituent lodges or their members made by recognized Masonic bodies not beholden to this Grand Lodge or their members. Grant charters for lodges and abrogate the same. Issue certificates and diplomas, assess and collect sums of money, and so on and so forth. So kind of similar, but this is the first one I've seen that says we have the power to create lodges.
Exactly. That's a good point. Because, yeah, I mean, there's the obvious things that, what we pay dues to, and, managing funds and managing charities, and, all that exists today.
And it also says here, maintain a uniform mode of work.
Ooh.
Conformity with the ancient landmarks that are not yet ancient.
Which ones?
And the customs of masonry. Which ones? Yes. So they kind of spell it out.
Yeah, why do they keep using? I've noticed on more than one occasion, like officially, they're just called the landmarks, and almost every Grand Lodge starts referring to they give them the title ancient. It's like when you play the telephone game, everybody just kind of changes it over time, and they just assume it's ancient landmarks, and it sticks. That's weird. I think Illinois has very similar rules. I'm actually looking them up as we speak.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of self-fulfilling, right? It's like we are this body, and we are allowed to make babies.
Well, I mean, it's a direct tie back to the guild system where, you had to be properly chartered to work.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes a lot of sense. It also makes a lot of sense that, if you have a body that is chartering other lodges, that body then can settle disputes between those lodges.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me to be like very much like an administrative and arbitration type of function, at least at the outset.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to have these subordinate groups that agree to conform to these laws, right? Like how was it when,
the consent of the governed.
Indeed.
What if like all the subordinate lodges just were like, nope, we're good. We don't need your charter anymore.
What do you call that when a state tries to pull out? Secession of Grand Lodge. Yeah, could you imagine?
If just all the subordinate lodges, the 300 or whatever per state, were just like, peace out. You're not my daddy anymore.
It's what's been happening to like the Methodist Church for the past 5 years.
Overnight.
So, the Constitution of the most worshipful Grand Lodge, ancient, free, and accepted Mason state of Illinois, begins with acts of incorporation and things, and it just kind of outlines. It says, whereas every Grand Lodge is sovereign within its prescribed jurisdiction and possesses the intent power to form a constitution as the law of its Masonic action, to amend or alter the same, to enact bylaws and from time to time, and to make such rules and prescribe such regulations for the admission of its constituent lodges as will ensure the prosperity thereof and promote the general good of Masonry, and whereas every Grand Lodge is the representative of all the fraternity in the communication therewith, and in that behalf is an absolute independent body with supreme legislative, executive, and judicial authority, provided always that the ancient landmarks of the institution be held inviolate. Therefore, upon these principles, which are indisputable, the Grand Lodge of Illinois does hereby ordain, establish, and promulgate the following Constitution for its future government. And it goes on to list, its official name for tax purposes, several pieces of its sovereignty, the officers that are to be there, and a lengthy list of things it's allowed to do, which essentially is the utmost government of each individual thing that you've ever heard of in Masonry, unless the constituent membership attempts to change said rules. And then sometimes the Grand Lodge still doesn't let that happen. But
Well,
for whatever
you're dovetailing into something important that we're kind of glossing over is no matter whose code book we're reading, and it's in every single one. I'm not going to go find them and read them. There's this implicit, going back to Jason's consent of the governed, there's this implicit authority that the Grand Master, while he's in office in this Grand Lodge, can do what he wants, kind of, sort of, right? Like he can make this new law, or he can pass this edict, or, push this resolution. And in the time that the actual governmental structure can pick up on it or actually do something or vote on it, it's already happening. Like there's been jurisdiction with Grand Masters that pass these weird laws and they don't get overturned or repealed or made part of the law until the next annual communication. So there's this implicit consent, as Jason pointed out, that we're saying that whoever's in charge can kind of sort of do what they want, for the time that they're there. And we're okay with that.
Yeah, it was either Jason or John, I thought, who originally coined the benevolent dictatorship.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. All right. So question becomes, that was good to kind of see the similarities and differences of some of these. And I just to paraphrase, it sounds like there's the appellate authority, and then there's also administrative authority as far as the primary functions of what a Grand Lodge does. So therefore, the following question exists. If and when the fraternity shrinks down to where the administrative overhead is really not worth the burden, right? What are some of the first things to go? Or what are some of the first things to outsource? And again, I kind of alluded to one where if you need arbitration, you can do that outside of a Grand Lodge system if you needed to. The function can still exist. It just does not have to be performed by
You're talking
an
about
internal
legal
regulatory
stuff.
body.
Yeah.
Not
Or
necessarily.
disputes between lodges.
Well,
Okay.
But
Yeah.
can it though? Because we're all adhering to codes and laws and regulations that says that in order to play in this sandbox, you have to adhere to these laws. And these laws stipulate that we are the overseer and purveyor of the law, and we're the decider. Could
Yeah.
you really get a third party to say,
Right.
hey, we'll mediate this dispute? It doesn't sound like you can.
I think
That would be the first thing you'd have to amend.
I think the thing
That
is,
would be an
though, is
amendment required.
nobody wants to maybe admit this, but we have seen plenty of cases, and I can cite at least 2 or 3 where Freemasonry thinks it's in charge of itself until somebody has the fortitude to take it above the Masonic court into a court of legal authority.
Right.
And when that happens, oftentimes Freemasonry's rules are ruled that can't be a thing, because it is, there exist rules that govern the state and federal laws that supersede even a private organization's, rules. There can still be things like discrimination and all of those other kinds of wild things. But like, to your point, arbitration, I think, can be done outside outside the fraternity, and more and more, that's probably going to end up being the case if and when something would happen that
Sure.
there were those types of conflicts.
Mhm.
We like I said, we pretend that we're the it can't be done outside the fraternity, but
Right.
we also have to play by rules too.
Let me pull that thread a little bit because I'm confused. So are we talking about a wrongdoing that's happened inside of Masonry that also is part of the legal framework of the society, or are we just talking about arbitrating things that are only Masonic code? Like, for example, let's say, I'm just pulling one out. Some jurisdictions say you can't have alcohol on a premise, right? And I go into my lodge with a 6-pack of beer and I sit down on the stoop and I chug it, and now I've broken Masonic law. I've not broken a civil or criminal law or infraction, right? Is that something that could be mediated upon outside of Masonry, or is that just Masonry going to say, hey, you broke the law, you're getting kicked out?
I think the answer is yes. I mean, that you could have a third party that could come and say, this is
I
what was
think
agreed
it's up
upon.
to the lodge leadership.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, each individual lodge could agree to a mediator and say, hey, these were the established precepts. This is the violation. Here's how we wish to handle it. And then have that handled. So again, that's certainly in the realm of possibility.
I think also thinking about history, right? I mean, Grand Lodges surely didn't always exist. And there is likely, I mean, there is a tremendous amount, don't get me wrong, a tremendous amount of benefit to having a Grand Lodge system.
Sure.
It sure does bring order out of what seemingly could be immense chaos. However, I mean, they made it work for a while. So
Right.
one would think that as hopefully as humanity evolves intellectually, and we have a civil society that maybe those original type just handshake agreements without a Grand Lodge might even be serving better today than they would in the past, but also maybe not. I don't know.
Then I got thinking too, some other scenarios that might kick in too would be, handling the collection of funds. I mean, everybody kind of does that with PayPal or anything like that nowadays. So you really just need one person with the authority to be able to administer and collect dues and everything. So whether that person still has the grand secretary title, but do you need it as a formal Grand Lodge system in a formal Grand Lodge building, et cetera, in order to do that? So again, I'm trying to separate the function that can still exist in a different capacity.
I mean, to your point, no, you don't need a building to collect funds.
Right, right.
You can a PO box and a PayPal account, and you're groovy.
So that function could still exist, even if it was much less
streamlined.
Yeah, much more streamlined than it is today. Now, what do we do with all these buildings and assets that, whether you have the luxury of living in a jurisdiction that has a beautiful edifice, nice, expensive asset, like a Grand Lodge building, but there's like 5 people left in the state. Like, what do you do with that, right? Obviously, not worth even just the upkeep, the operations and maintenance of that building. We see that happen all the time. We see buildings get sold off, and that's sad. But much to Chris Hodap's chagrin, we have to manage those assets that way too.
Well, I mean, to your point, it's we've kind of turned the corner in the last couple of decades where they're no longer assets anymore, right? They're now liabilities. It's not true to own that building that's over 100 years old and has asbestos everywhere and all this stuff. They're no longer assets, right? They're now costing you more money to maintain than
liabilities.
So
that's an easy one. Sell the building.
Well, I mean, that the same could be said for, I know we're talking about Grand Lodges today. Same could be said for some lodges, right?
Sure.
Is, because most Grand Lodges don't take on the financial responsibility of a subordinate lodge. They're not there for that, So if a lodge is struggling and failing and they can't pay their rent, the Grand Lodge doesn't come down and swoop down and save the day and give you a big pot of money. So, there's, again, it's that consent of the governed thing versus this body's here to administer for me, but if I'm failing and I'm struggling, there's no help that's coming, right? It's okay. The lodge gets closed down, the charter gets turned in, the assets get sold, and you move on.
Now, when it becomes of such a low membership that the administrative burden might be better served by actually consolidating Grand Lodges instead of collapsing, now we might have, to Suncard's point, what if multiple Grand Lodges united in order to cover a broader geographical region? So, hypothetically, right, you could have, if membership got so low that the administrative burden was better served to be spread out, you could actually have like a Northeast Grand Lodge, a Southeast Grand Lodge, a Midwest Grand Lodge, right? West Coast Grand Lodge.
I mean, it's already happening though, John, in other appendant bodies. I mean, the first one I could think of is Rainbow. There are Rainbow Grand Assemblies that are made up of multiple states. So there's not one for each state anymore. Other appendant bodies in the Masonic family have already started to consolidate those grand
and even have a single grand body covering multiple jurisdictions. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Well, we already have that in Prince Hall in the U.S. I believe there's the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Washington and jurisdiction, so Washington State, which covers more than just Washington State. I'm trying to get the deets on it. Yes. Throughout the state of Washington and jurisdiction, which includes Canada, England, Germany, Iceland, Iraq, Kuwait, Turkey, Guam, Republic of Korea, Okinawa, and mainland Japan, and the Republic of the Philippines.
That's a lot.
Isn't the same also true with Florida, I believe, as well?
That goes back and forth. There's some weirdness with the Grand Lodge of Cuba that pops up every couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with Cuba, it's weird. Every once in a while, I think it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we dealt with something here in the U.S. where they had accused Cuba of governing a couple of Masonic lodges on Florida soil or something.
Yeah.
But then that was since remedied. So because Grand Lodge existed to do that.
Nice. So it could be possible where you could even have it consolidated to one Grand Lodge of the United States of America.
Oof,
we talked about this like a couple months ago.
Yeah,
or a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it is. Okay, so when you first came up with this idea of obsolescence, right? The first thing I thought of was like, man, I bet John is just going to go off the rails,
blow it up
about how Grand Lodges would somehow manage each other's legitimacy through some sort of blockchain. You get validated on the chain.
You're not wrong.
Well,
in a zero trust environment, how do you?
Okay, zero trust is not blockchain.
I don't trust
zero
you.
Trust.
For recognition.
Zero trust in Grand Lodges, though.
Yeah. Oh, that hurts my head.
A while back, okay, I was talking with Scott Dubal, and we were hanging out, and we were talking after the Grand Master had one of his town halls. And we got to talking with the Deputy Grand Master, who is now, at the time we talked to the deputy grandmaster, and he said something like, we got to care about membership, because if we don't, we can't fund the Grand Lodge. And if we can't fund the Grand Lodge, there's no masonry in Illinois. And I thought,
It's a bold statement.
that is a bold statement, because any number of things could happen. But I'll guarantee you this. There are lodges very similar to my mother lodge who would just be like, fine.
Yeah. Okay. You're not my boss anymore.
Waukegan Lodge number 78, constituted October 30th, 1849, under the Grand Lodge of the state of Illinois, reconstituted, independent, Waukegan, whatever the year is. I don't think.
Just the Waukegan Lodge.
I don't think if a Grand Lodge goes defunct.
Worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario, if Grand Lodge goes defunct and another Grand Lodge doesn't step in to take jurisdiction to a
correct. Yep. Big assumption.
Or
does masonry disappear? No.
The Southern Jurisdiction Scottish Rite doesn't jump in to take jurisdiction.
I mean, I think they have that option. I think it's buried somewhere.
It's that one clause you didn't read when you joined Scottish Rite.
Yeah.
I haven't joined yet, and I know about it.
So you're saying it's a thing.
You're saying there's a chance.
So, yeah. I think also something that could be is wild is if Grand Lodges go obsolete, it really leaves. I mean, I like to rag on the fact that a lot of times guys are just about the charities and stuff, but I can't. I mean, you have to acknowledge the amount of charitable efforts that exist in all of the Grand Lodges. What happens to those charities and the people
who
that
runs
they assist?
those?
Illinois has the largest Masonic charitable organizations in the entire United States. So much so that, like, it's bigger than the Grand Lodge in terms of financials. So, like, what would happen to those? Well, here, probably nothing. We'd have, I think we'd end up with a charitable board, and that would be the end of it. And we'd have members who, like, donate money every year or something like that.
Right.
But it's so interesting to think about, because I do think about, you have those like charts that have the where your charter came from, like for Virginia, for instance, like where yours came from. If Virginia goes away, does the state that originally helped charter you step in?
Ooh, that would be interesting.
And is that like considered cool?
Yeah,
well, that's a pickle, right? Because all of the colonies were under the Provincial Grand Lodge of England, more or less, before they self-chartered after the Revolution.
Funny, Virginia actually had 5 separate chartered Grand Lodges that formed the lodges that made up the Grand Lodge of Virginia. Right?
Well, lodges, you had lodges that were chartered from England.
That's what I said.
Ancients and moderns, and then
Ireland, Scotland, Pennsylvania, because we actually had a couple lodges that were chartered by Pennsylvania in the territory of Virginia, and we had some under the Grand Lodge Grand Lodge of America at the time. Yeah. So again, who's your daddy when you have 5 baby daddies?
DNA test.
Yes. 17 and me. RJ had a good question in the notes. At what point do membership numbers dip to a point where it can no longer support the Grand Lodge? The first thing that comes to mind is, okay, there is no maximum number of members of the Grand Lodge, but if it got down to, say, 2 lodges, as long as someone can be dual-hatted and hold the title of Grand Master, Grand Secretary, Grand, et cetera, if you have just enough members to be dual-hatted as members of the Grand Lodge, administratively, it could still exist. Except, again, it's just the 10 of you sitting around your own lodge, also being Grand Lodge members at the same time.
Just pass around the apron.
Yeah. But obviously, practically, it's not sustainable at that point. So does it die a whimpered death at that point? Right? Because if there's no incentive to merge with other Grand Lodges, like we just talked about, or Sun Card's question, you're like, no, I'm good. As long as I still have 10 people that can serve the role of the Grand Officers.
Yeah, well,
Are we okay? Like, can we just ride this thing out and see what happens? Ride into the sunset?
we could, right? But I don't know that. I think apathy exists to a point that would kind of just kill it. I mean,
exactly.
Look,
I don't want that to happen.
I mean, okay, let's just say this happens and your grandkids kind of know you were a Mason and stuff. And like, we like to think that there's just going to be some sort of, we'll meet at least once a year to keep it going.
Right.
And then what? We all eventually just kind of die and fall off, and the organization dies, right? Until some goofball decides to find the chemical wedding of John Ruark and divinely
blow it off.
Inspire something.
Still looking for the chemical sterilization of John Ruark.
But yeah, like it'll go away and likely born again under something else. I mean, that's kind of what happens. It's amazing we've lasted this long. I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
The Blues-Accretions. Nice. As opposed to the Rosicrucians.
Because it's Blue Lodge.
Oh, they meant blue balls.
Joe, I am going to steal your mouse.
He doesn't know what that is.
It's a clicky mouse.
It is a very clicky mouse. Oh, man.
Wow.
Killing me, Smalls.
Gotta get the magic mouse.
What was that?
That's the magic trackpad, bro. Why don't you just use one of those?
Oh, you so fancy.
You're fancier than I am. Dude, I love that your action figures are all back up.
We're back, baby. We're back. Yes.
Okay, so that's it. So we just fade into existence.
Non-existence.
Yeah.
Yes. Fade into non-existence.
I'm going
2040.
to...
Or do we all become like those really weird clandy Grand Lodges, like the most worshipful and powerful
Joe
Grand
Martinez Lodge. Yeah.
Yes, of Joe Martinez Sr.
Texas.
Which state will be the first to ditch its Grand Lodge?
I second that.
Yeah. Third.
And not because they don't like it. Because liberty. Or something.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't know.
Well, so again, Alaska and Hawaii are pretty low numbers, but that's because of just the population size. But again, I'm gonna put my dollar down on Utah being a continental one with 1469 members.
Nice.
I'm gonna go
on mute.
Yeah, apparently my mute button is exploding.
At least for your mouse. Yuck, you made him leave.
Come back, Joe.
Yes. I before you hopped on, RJ, John was talking about the really low jurisdiction numbers. I kind of feel like you'll get that Hawaii Alaska consolidation like before one of them
makes sense.
Closes down, like those small jurisdictional starts up.
Yeah, I mean they're so close on a map.
well again, that's where I think Utah would be the best bet because it could hit a neighboring jurisdiction and just ride that administrative thing. That'd be very easy to do. Just say, congratulations, we are now
like the Dakotas, I wonder. They're already low population states because of the industries.
I mean, why wouldn't it just adhere to the Grand Lodge Colorado, and that jurisdiction now becomes a very large adjacent jurisdiction.
The Rocky Mountain Grand Lodge?
Rocky Mountain jurisdiction. Yeah.
Right. And that's how it would start.
Mid-Atlantic?
It would start annexing these other stronger Grand Lodges would start annexing the these other failing Grand Lodges. And you
I
get
was
these
just
pockets.
I was looking at the MSA&A numbers, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if Texas would just start gobbling up its neighboring jurisdictions.
You get New Mexico is also very low.
Yeah.
I think it's only got 20-some hundred members.
California will split in the north and south. It'll join Washington State. And then, you'd have the Mid-Atlantic area Grand Lodge, in which case you'll have to rename the Facebook group again.
Yeah.
Mid-Atlantic Freemasons.
Yes. Not before 2040, buddy.
You only do it once.
Trademark. They're going to have to buy it from us.
This is Squared Company's copyrighted. Yeah, we bought it off of Joe Martinez.
We bought it on Etsy.
So Justin St. Germain has a good point here. UGLE will just claim parental control.
Yeah, if you
I don't think that's
going to
happen.
If you kids can't figure it out, we're just going to take it back.
I don't think UGLE wants any of this.
Yeah, we are too educational focused. Yeah.
No, well, all kidding aside, I mean,
I'm not kidding.
We're talking about this from a continental U.S. perspective. You've got other jurisdictions that are exploding in membership right now, right? Outside of the United States, like you've got the Philippines and you've got countries in Europe where Masonry is on the rise. It's not declining. South America, and they're happy splitting up into their own little grand jurisdictions, and there's no infighting there. But I look at the Philippines as a great example. Like that jurisdiction is just exploding in numbers, ridiculous. They do not suffer from any of the problems that we suffer from here in the United States. So it's kind of
Malay.
They love all the things, man.
Yeah.
All the things.
So here in Illinois, we're right by the Great Lakes Naval Base training station, and there's a large Filipino population that joins the U.S. military, and they come through the naval base here, and we've got just a number of lodges that are even mostly comprised of Filipino members. They just had 2 years ago. They started. I think they're 1184 Lodge Pilipinas in Chicago.
What?
There's 1469 members in Utah.
1469. Again, nice.
All right, let's wrap it up for final thoughts and final question of the day, which is a good one. Given what we discussed tonight, you are Grand Master of a failing jurisdiction. And you have come to terms with the fact that you need to completely restructure the Grand Lodge governing body of your jurisdiction in order to make it survive. What would be included in your 100-day plan? All right, so I'll say that again, give you some time to think about it. You're currently Grand Master. You've made the hard decision. We've got to change our Grand Lodge system. It's not sustainable anymore. What are some of the items you would include in your 100-day plan to make those hard decisions, and what actions would you take? Jason gets to lead the way.
Nice job, Mike.
Auction it off.
Auction it off. No, I would say you have to start with the budget. And so if the lodge system is failing, then there's most likely some bloat in the Grand Lodge finances. Honestly, what I would do is I would make a concerted effort to throw support into those areas of Masonry in my grand jurisdiction that were thriving, if any existed. And so maybe, maybe the youth groups are doing really, really well, but the Star and Amaranth are not. Then I would say, okay, let's let those systems and organizations that are struggling and not providing value, let's sunset those and let's put our effort and energy into those things that are experiencing a revival and a boom. And I'm just using those as a thanks, G-Man. Um, just using those kind of as straw man examples. Um, but yeah, I would need to address the bloat, and I'd need to make sure that we spent our Grand Lodge resources much more wisely.
Although they should be doing that today, but all of your predecessors didn't. So
I'm
here
not
we are.
a Grand Lodge officer today, so thank God.
Joe, go ahead.
Definitely going to steal some answers that I've seen on the chat. First thing is, yep, sell those buildings, sell the assets, and move as many things as possible to online. You can keep everything in Teams or Google Workspace. You don't need tons and tons of storage space for things. You can buy a tiny little, WeWorkshop if you want to have a little museum or something like that and pay for that monthly. But yeah, get rid of all the physical assets. They are not needed to be a Mason. And then, just cut where we can, and actually bring in funds for the things that Grand Lodges should be doing, is making more lodges and, making sure that Masons have the resources they need to be successful. So, yep. Cut.
Slash, baby, slash.
Mm-hmm.
RJ.
I was taking notes.
Deep in thought.
I think so. What I would do is I would do some research, and I would probably surrender all of our membership, not sell, but surrender the membership that we have to a neighboring jurisdiction that has a good, solid membership that's showing, if not growth, at least uh, like a popular trend of people enjoying masonry in that state. I might take all of the buildings, probably lease them to those neighboring jurisdictions who might want to have, like, let's say, an ambassador program or a local presence in the state where they actually are. I take all the assets of the Grand Lodge. Sorry about the dog. And I would sell them off and pad the charitable accounts. And then I would take those charitable accounts and I would empty them completely. So we didn't have to have anybody on deck to manage them. And those charitable funds, I think it would empty them into existing public charities, like, underserved communities or hospitals, or the public education system for sure, or something like the Boys and Girls Club. Yeah, just things like that. Or just call it a day.
It's a good one. Good one. All right. And then let's see. Over for me, basically what you guys have said. I would sustain all the bright spots. If the TO lodges, like the 3 that are left, are doing great, then I would support them with my last financial aspect and administrative support. Definitely outsource those things that could be done by anybody. All the administrative stuff, collecting of dues, arbitration we talked about, those things that are basic, that aren't Masonic but just are necessary for the running of any organization. Outsource that stuff to the greatest extent possible. And then as you guys have said, it really becomes either merging with friendly jurisdictions and or just flat out donating and saying, that instead of a merge, it's a complete acquisition takeover, and it's no longer let's just say, for example, it's no longer the Grand Lodge of West and East Virginia. No, it just becomes like the Grand Lodge of West Virginia, and everything just gets handed over to those, you know, that I feel could run it appropriately, right? So it's not just resigning, but it's handing over the keys to someone that I feel is worthy to take things over, or host some one-day classes. Got to pump up those numbers. It's my year, so in my year, membership went up 200% because we raised 2 members. So, but yeah, I think it's an interesting thought exercise that hopefully we'll never get to. We certainly, I think any of us would advocate that this doesn't happen. But these are the things that Grand Lodges need to think about and consider as some sort of succession planning that's going to happen, you know, in the next 18 years or so. So hopefully it doesn't happen. Prove me wrong. This has been a great topic. We'll see you next week. I keep searching for more light. Have a good night.
Wow.